Okay, so the first stitch that we are going to learn how to sew is called a running stitch. This is the most basic sewing stitch, and if you have done any hand sewing at all, this is probably the first thing that you learned how to do. So I have my thread here with my knot like we had talked about in the first lesson, and a piece of fabric. I folded my piece of fabric in half. That's up to you if you want to do it that way. I am teaching this right-handed, but I will flip in a minute and show the left-handed version of it if you need to do that. So I'm going to just hold it in my left hand. You simply, to start with, take your needle and take it through the fabric like this, grab and pull. And the knot's going to stop it. Now I have just grabbed it with my hand. Remember that second piece of thread is just hanging out there. You have to kind of keep your hand on the thread when you're sewing, otherwise the needle will come unthreaded. You then insert the needle, scoot over it a little bit, insert the needle, pull it through to the back. Scoot over a little bit further, come up, go back down. This is a running stitch. This is the stitch that you learn, in Girl Scouts and in art class, when they teach you how to sew with yarn. This is the very basic stitch. Here are the things, here are a couple tricks for the running stitch that will help you. The first thing is that I am doing a very bad job of keeping these a consistent size. The reason that I'm having such trouble is because my phone is between me and my fabric, so I'm doing this kind of blind. You want to keep your stitches a consistent size and a straight line. So if it helps you to draw a line, physically draw a line on the fabric, you can do that. Another thing is once you get the hang of this and you're like, wow, this is really easy and this is going really slow, is that you can actually do it where you, I have my hand so that my hand is behind this on the back side. I can put the needle in, scoot it along a little bit, back up, scoot it, back up. Okay, do we see what we're doing here? I'm just going back and forth, rocking it back and forth like this so that it's going back and forth. And I can do that 3 or 4 times and then just pull and make all of these stitches at once. That's definitely a lot faster and definitely a lot easier. So you can figure out how to do that pretty easily also. The back and the front should look pretty similar. The stitching, normally you want to make it somewhere between 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch on each stitch. That's a pretty reasonable size to make it. Now, if you're doing this left-handed, this is actually fairly easy to demonstrate left-handed because you just hold the fabric with your other hand and do it through this way and back down. Now what's going to end up happening as you sew is this other piece of thread that's just hanging out here. See that one? I was just kind of hanging around. It's going to kind of get shorter and shorter as you work. It's sort of a working thread that does that, so that you end up using all of the thread eventually. One thing that you do want to be careful about is that you don't get your thread so short that you run out of thread before you can make a knot at the end. We have to have a knot in our thread at the beginning and at the end, otherwise the thread just comes out. So you want to make sure that you stop in time to make that knot. And I am not there yet. You can see I clearly have plenty of thread left, but I'm done sewing. And so you're like, well, okay, how do I make a knot at the end of it? The way that we make a knot at the end is our last stitch like this. I'm going to make a stitch where I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to just make 3 stitches that are right on top of each other. So these 3 stitches are pretty much right on top of each other like that. What that will do, see how they're all, now there's like 3 stitches just stacked together. What that will do is lock your thread well enough that that's good enough for a knot. And then you can simply cut the extra thread and be done with it. Okay. What you want to do for your sample is do a row or 2 across the 6 inches of the fabric. And then after you get done with that, for each sample, you want to write on here which stitch it is and put your name. Let me tell you, first of all, you're going to forget what your stuff looks like and forget what it's called. And second of all, when you turn them in, they all are going to look the same. So please make sure that you have what stitch it is and what your name is on each one of the papers. Now, I can go ahead and demonstrate the second stitch on the same piece of fabric if I want, and you can do that too. If you have room to put a second row on your fabric, you can go ahead and do that. There's no sense in wasting fabric. But you know, it's up to you. You don't have to. Totally up to you. So what you want to do then after you get done with each sample is reload. I still have, I don't know if this is enough thread left to do the next sample or not. I don't know. I went ahead and put a knot in it. You know, once you get to about, you know, maybe a foot of thread, it's going to be too short to really do the next sample with. So you can just cut a new piece of thread and start with a new one. I'm going to show you again just so that you can see this coming from the back. And going in and out at about 1/4 of an inch, or between 1/4 and 1/2 inch on each one. Now, if you're having a lot of trouble with this, and you still need to go individually in and pull it all the way through, and then come up from the back and pull it all the way through, you can do that. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Everybody's going to be pacing slightly differently with this. Keep a hold of the needle and the thread, and so that you don't have to worry about the needle coming unthreaded. But I'm going to go ahead and stop that. So I'm going to do 3 stitches on top of each other. And then I'll cut that thread off. You want to, if you start to get where you only have about 6 inches worth of thread left, you want to go ahead and stop and make a knot. Otherwise you won't have enough thread to make your knot, and it'll make you mad because if you can't knot it off, it doesn't really do any good. So that is running stitch. Okay, so that is the first of the hand sewing samples to do.